Hello, I'm C.V. Lee of Paper Lantern Writers, and today I'm joined by a fellow lantern, Edie Cay. Last year, Edie, Anna Brazel, and I did a presentation on settings that transport the reader at Yoloboka Float, PDX. The presentation was geared towards readers, and then this June, we did a similar presentation designed for writers. Now I'm hosting a three-part series to discuss our unique perspective on what setting means for each of our genres. So Edie, you write Regency Romance. First, can you give us an idea of what the reader expectations are for your genre?
Absolutely. So Regency Romance is a historical romance set during the Regency times in England. So that would be 1811 to about 1820, with some slop on either side, of course. The reader expectations of any romance is love story is central to the main theme, and then a happily ever after happens at the end. If it's a happily ever after or a happily ever after for now. So in the lingo, we use HEA or an HFN. Also for Regency romances, it's typically geared towards the aristocracy. So you have dukes and duchesses, earls, viscounts. There's lots of beautiful people. There's dancing and balls and gowns. There's just a lot of texture to it that a lot of times you don't get in contemporary romances. And I used that in my first book, A Lady's Revenge, which I'm going to brag about for just a second. It won the Golden Leaf Award for Best Debut Novel and also the Indie Next Generation Award for Romance. So I used those themes. I used classism as one of the things that take the two characters apart. And then in my second novel, The Box from the Blacksmith, which just came out this year, I decided to stay away from the aristocracy. And this book is literally about a boxer, a female boxer, and a blacksmith. And that's set in Paddington, which is one of the small towns that got sort of swallowed up by London. So contemporary London, you can go to Paddington, which is now just an area of the city. It's got its own tube stop, but historically was an Irish population.
So you have a unique perspective on what your setting does. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. So I view setting as my wingman. So a wingman, of course, being the person who helps you land someone for the evening or helps, steer a romance. So setting for any romance is, the time and the place. Yes. So Regency England, time being 1811 to 1820, that's setting, true. However, there are so many aspects of Regency romances that help along a romance. So one of the things I think of are tropes. This is, again, very common to talk about in romance, not as typical to talk about in mysteries or literary fiction, even though they do exist. But romance readers like to know what they're getting into ahead of time, often because romance readers are extremely voracious, which is why romance, of course, sells more than any other genre out there. And so setting is one of the tropes. For instance, there's only one bed. It's one of the common tropes. And so that's setting, right? It's a room. There's only one bed. What are we to do? The other
one on the floor.
Are they though? Are they? And the other one, of course, is forced proximity. Stuck in a room together, stuck in a snowed-in cottage together, something like that. So in terms of Regency romance, there's only one bed. You go to an inn and, oh my goodness, they don't have two rooms. They only have one, which of course happened in Diana Quincy's debut novel, which was fabulous. A Duchess of Indian descent and I can't remember the male protagonist. Anyway, only one bed. And then forced proximity. In Regency romances, forced proximity can often take the form of a carriage ride because distances were very long, and London at that time was already plagued with traffic jams. So you got stuck in a carriage for a long time. If you were in a closed carriage, you were typically supposed to have some kind of chaperone. but men and women were allowed to ride in open carriages together without a chaperone. The idea being that everyone's going to see you, and so you can't try anything. One of the other favorite tropes with forced proximity, I didn't use it in my book, but libraries at a ball, which was used in the first Bridgerton book. It wasn't in the series, but it was in the book where Daphne Bridgerton takes a break from the ball, goes into the library, and meets Simon Bassett, the Duke of Hastings, one of her older brother's friends, and they have a very steamy exchange. But also Daphne Bridgerton punches somebody in the mouth, which is also very hilarious. I was in some ways a little bummed out that that was not how we started the Bridgerton series. But again, forced proximity, it works in so many settings. It's very common in Regency romances to have that, oh, I'm going to just escape to the library. Oh, someone's already in here? What? So that's one of those ways that setting can really enhance and help your plot line along in a Regency romance.
Well, and also with those settings, everybody's got their best foot forward.
Everybody's wearing their beautiful clothes, their beautiful shoes. So everyone's looking their best, hopefully. So one of the things that we talked about in our presentation at the Historical Novel Society in June was how setting is more than a time and a place. So it's, for me, Wingman, of course, is what we were talking about, but it's also the sociopolitical, it's also the society in which these characters are living. It's more than just the buildings or the vehicles. So for us, the social mores of Regency are one of the defining characteristics, because women of the upper class who were single had very restricted movements. Once they were married, that changed. If you were of the lower class, it changed. So one of the ways to expand a young lady's movements was to take them to a country house. And that is one of the things that I did in A Lady's Revenge. Lady Lydia here, she ends up going to a country house where the hero, John Arthur, is going to be giving a boxing exhibition. So we have these two people who are stuck in a country house together. The chaperones are distracted, things are not as strict. So you have a little more freedom of movement, and Lady Lydia takes advantage of that. So she gets a couple of extra boxing lessons in with John Arthur without prying eyes.
And some steamy scenes.
And a little bit of steam there too. So it's one of the ways that my setting was, I was able to use that particular aspect, that relaxation, in order to give them an opportunity that they would never have had if they stayed in London. So I used the country house as my entire act too. And if you are a writer, then you know that there is the problem with the saggy act two. That's the soggy middle is a big problem for a lot of writers, because your act one is your introduction of conflict. Your act three is the resolution of all your conflict. What are you doing in act two to further your plot, to keep your readers engaged? So for me in A Lady's Revenge, I just took them to a new place where they would have a different setting in which to interact. And yeah. So in Boxer and the Blacksmith, I actually had to do the opposite. In A Lady's Revenge, classism is keeping my characters apart. Lady Lydia is of the upper class. John Arthur, while rich and famous, basically, is of the lower class, which is not an appropriate match. In The Boxer and the Blacksmith, Oz Worley is a blacksmith, which is what we would consider middle class, you know, a skilled tradesman, made plenty of good money. But Bess, being a female boxer, is of the lowest of the low. However, she's famous because she is the best female boxer in London. And she's best friends with John Arthur, who works in the stock exchange, and so has made her, you know, small money a tidy sum. So he's helped her financially. But they want to be together. There is nothing that is internally tearing them apart. So I had to use the setting as what tore them apart. At one point, Oz has to go to Manchester in order to take care of some things that are part of his backstory. And Bess doesn't read or write. So it's not like Oz can send her a message. And especially at that time, the receiver of a letter had to pay the postage, which was extremely expensive for them. So there's no way that they would write a letter. So when Oz is physically outside of London, Bess has no idea if he's going to come back. And part of her childhood is knowing that people don't come back for you. So even though it seems like a silly thing, like, yeah, the dude just left, it's fine, he said he's coming back, Bess cannot fundamentally believe that, because she's been trained her entire life that when people go out of sight, they're gone forever.
And yet they're such a cute couple.
They're my favorite.
So I like this. Yeah, I like your whole concept of the wingman. Setting is drawing them together, pulling them apart. You know, it's a great way to think about how to design what's going on.
With your genre in mind, because obviously in a mystery, it has to be something completely different. In a family saga, it has to be completely different because you are driving towards a specific goal, right? So in romance, your goal is to get these people together with some drama so that the readers feel rewarded when they get together and that they have a happily ever after. And that's one of the things that I feel is most amazing about romance, is that in literary fiction, if you get them together, then your reader goes, so easy. And it doesn't have that high stakes the way romance, because the reader enters into it hoping that, knowing actually that they are going to get together. So when you are, in the beginning of the third act and everything goes wrong, that you gave them everything they ever wanted, and then it just nosedives, and you're like, how are they going to get through it? That is what your reader is looking for. They're looking for a grovel. They're looking for high stakes action, high stakes emotional vulnerability. And that's what romance gives. So your setting is what is going to heighten all of those aspects, and you can craft an outline appropriately.
Well, I hope everybody has learned a lot about how to set up a romance. So thanks, Edie, for joining me today. And if you've enjoyed this interview, subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to join our group on Facebook, Shine with Paper Lantern Writers.